I'd like to call the meeting to order. If we can stand and say the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We have no visitors wishing to speak. I'm not aware of any written communication. Did we have any committee meetings?
We had a tech committee meeting today, but we can add it to the agenda for the next time. We'll let Dr. Schoenfeld synthesize what happened and summarize it after he's had a chance to process.
Okay, perfect. With that, I guess we'll turn it over to you. Superintendent's report.
Great, we have Mr. Pigeon and representatives from the Pathfinders Task Force at the high school here tonight to recognize our students and teachers of the month for January and February. So welcome.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, and we're always very grateful to have the opportunity to shine a spotlight on the wonderful success of our students at Amherst, as well as the efforts of our faculty. I have a couple of Amherst finest in tow this evening, some of our Pathfinders, so I'll let them introduce themselves as well as introduce our Students of the Month and Teacher of the Month.
Hello, my name is Owen Nelson. I'm a junior at Amherst High School.
I'm Parker Alabisi. I'm also a junior at Amherst High School.
The first person we're going to introduce is a student nominee, John O'Day. John O'Day was nominated as Student of the Month by Logan Sullivan and Mr. Justin Pomelards. Logan states that John is one of the most deserving people for Student of the Month. John's demeanor in class is demonstrative to his devotion to his studies. He's an avid member of the school's drama club and will take the stage for the Phantom of the Opera. Above all, John is a good person. He cares for his friends and fellow peers and encourages them to succeed as much as he has. Mr. Pomelar stated that John has been a baritone member of the concert chorale and operetta since he arrived at the high school.
Professionals to explain and answer questions to literally hundreds of students from our high school. The Math Career Day that Mrs. Sorrentino spent so much of her time organizing will hopefully be a new Amherst tradition that will always be credited to her dedication to the students of Amherst. She's also been an advisor to the Red Cross Club, and over the years, Amherst students have donated thousands of pints of blood through her leadership for this most worthy cause. Congratulations, Mrs. Sorrentino, for being chosen as February's Teacher of the Month.
Thank you.
The other recognized Student of the Month is Annika Straight. Annika Straight was nominated as a Student of the Month by Mr. Joseph Maxwell. Mr. Maxwell states before class begins, she does not have her head buried in the next bestseller. Annika can be found drawing happy, rainbow-filled cartoon caricatures that stop you in your tracks and melt your heart with happiness. But once that bell rings, she flips the switch and puts on her academic hat, like white on rice in a blizzard on the windward side of the mountain. It is once in a while, a long while, that a student comes along that has a true love of learning, a willingness to learn that shadows obstacles and barriers that stand in the way of grasping difficult concepts. Annika maximizes her horsepower with an intense work ethic on a consistent basis without making excuses. She is a class leader who models appropriate behavior and academic prowess to accomplish her goals. Recently, Annika stepped out of her comfort zone and asked me if she could give me a mini lesson on plasma, the fourth state of matter. And the mini lesson she delivered engaged the class the entire time. She didn't ask for extra credit. Annika simply wanted to share her passion that she has for lightning and for neon signs alike. When Mr. Maxwell asked her how often she engages in public speaking, she said, "Never. This is my first time, and I just love plasma." Then she remarked as she left his class, "Mr. Max, if you ever need me to do another mini lesson, I would be happy to." Wow, Mr. Max said to himself. Annika is his go kid go. He is proud and honored to recommend this fine young lady. Congratulations, Annika, for being chosen as one of February's Students of the Month.
Congratulations. Maybe you can come back and give us that lecture sometime.
So we have one more nomination. It's for Mr. Spielberger, who is nominated as the Teacher of the Month by Mr. Close. Mr. Close states that Mr. Spiel has always been an inspiration in his life since last May when he started his long-term assignment in the Social Studies Department at Amherst. His generosity, intelligence, and genuineness always make him a nominee for Teacher of the Month. He shows great concern for all of his students, and he is always willing to go the extra mile. Mr. Spiel, as everyone affectionately calls him, consistently offers his guidance and suggestions in the most professional and courteous way possible. Mr. Spiel has welcomed Mr. Close to the Social Studies Department with open arms, and their conversations are always meaningful and fun. Furthermore, every 6 days he brings in the most delicious treats for our department meetings. Thank you, Mr. Spiel, for being such a wonderful colleague, mentor, and friend. Congratulations, Mr. Spielberger, for chosen as January's Teacher of the Month.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Thanks, gentlemen.
Nice job. Congratulations to all our students and Teachers of the Month. We're very proud of you. Keep up the good work throughout this spring, if it gets here. So we're moving on. Speaking of the spring season, we've begun our construction for phase 1 of our capital project. So Carlos Zavadi is here from Turner Construction, and Jackie Dukowski, along with Mr. Rampato and Mrs. Wazinski, who oversee the project, to talk a little bit about phase 1, current construction, and some of the plans as they're laid out throughout the summer here. Welcome.
Just gonna stand up, so just point if you don't mind.
No, that's
All right, thank you, Tony. Everyone has one of these handouts, right? I know the board has color. There's some black and whites at the podium. Just a quick general brief overview of where we're at right now with the phase 1 project. I'm happy to report that we are starting construction, actually started construction last week. And the exciting building, everyone's checking things out and all the equipment shows up and everyone's really curious. So it's good to see the work starting, especially with the winter. So it's good to get advantage of that time. Just want to back up before I get into the site plan real quick. On February 14th, the board officially awarded the contracts to a 2-prime contract. The first one, general contractor, was SLR Contracting. They'll be in charge of doing the interior work, very minor ADA chairlift replacements. And the second prime, which is the bulk of the project of phase 1, was awarded to Aquino Corp, who's doing the current site work, which you see outside. On February 28th, we officially had our kickoff meeting with the contractors. And March 5th, we started hitting the ground running, as everyone can see outside. So with that, I just wanted to go over the site plan real quick and just kind of give everyone a feel of what's happening out there in the different phases. So in this gray area here, we attacked the tennis courts first. This site here is started on March 5th, and you can see this blue fence area here. This is kind of containing everything in the corner while the athletics department is still maintaining their spring sports, which is going to continue on till May 25th. Currently, we've torn all these courts out here, and 3/4 of this court is gone. All the existing site fencing around the tennis courts are also fully removed. And we've also began installing what's called a silt fence, which is about 3 or 4 feet high. It's about black, semi-transparent fabric. And we're putting that along the residential line to kind of aid in keeping the dust in and try to keep the residents contained on that side, so we don't have any construction debris going in there. So moving forward, we're going to start attacking the track and field area starting after May 25th. Once that happens, the entire fence here in this blue will be removed, and the site's going to be continually maintained from the full perimeter, so that access will be completely off limits for everyone after that date. That'll allow us to concentrate on the track and get that turf installed for everyone. Currently, construction is starting around 7 o'clock in the morning, and we typically end around 4. So I know that notices have been sent to the community, so we haven't had any issues out there so far. And we look forward to delivering an awesome project. I'm really excited. I know design team's excited, and I know the rest of the district's pumped up about it. So looking forward to delivering the project. If anybody has any questions.
I got a question. The actual track and the field, how is it going to be different than it is now, presently is? The texture or the materials?
I mean, in terms of the track surface, you won't really see much of a difference other than the fact that you'll have a more functional track surface because what's out there is really deteriorated. The design of the field, it has a nice Amherst logo on it. Some of the sports lines are kind of changing minorly based on what the athletic director's vision is for the field. But the field system itself is, really high tech. It's, kind of the latest technology for field systems, so it's going to look really awesome. It's going to look a lot more like grass than what you have out there now. So anybody is going to be able to walk out there and see a really bright, new colorful field.
Will it be more when the kids fall on it? Is there any difference in how the resistance is or non-resistance compared to what it is now?
I'm sure that just because of the age of the field now, the actual GMAX testing it's at the end of its useful lifespan. So there's definitely going to be an improvement with a new system to, really, last for the next 15 years with, what current standards are for, their health and safety, for the players. So
the technology for artificial surfaces has improved significantly since we installed it in '04, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
They, I may not know the exact term, I think it's a split film turf, which means that the blades of grass actually split and continue to expand, and ours have split so much that they're now matted down where it mimics like an old AstroTurf type of turf, where the new style of turf now is a hybrid. It's a monofilm and a split film weaved together. So it has single blades that stand upright and that split film together. So as it splits, it fills out and appears to be much more full and grass-like and stands more the test of time. So that will be a significant improvement, along with the 6 pounds of fill that will be in there, 3 pounds of crushed rubber, and 3 pounds of sand. So it should be significantly easier on our athletes' bodies.
It's important for the community to know that, I think.
Yeah.
That's why you asked the question.
Yeah, it's a great question. We're certainly not replacing it just for the sake of wanting to have something new. It's reached its useful life, and it was time for us to have a new one. We were fortunate enough to be able to work it into a capital project so we get the aid back on it, and not just have to incur the cost of the replacement on our own. The other thing I think that's noteworthy is when the previous administration and board originally put it in, they did it the right way. So there's actually padding underneath the turf, and that padding is, according to what we've seen, in great condition. So we're going to be able to maintain that pad in addition to the 6 pounds of fill that will be inside of the turf itself. So we'll have the best of both worlds, because a lot of times people are faced with either pad or a significant amount of fill, and we have both. So
That's 6 pounds per.
I don't remember exactly what the measurement is, but it's per their regulations, their guidelines. Yeah.
It's amazing the usage it's got in the last 14 years. It's just remarkable. I go up there a fair amount. There's kids, older people, just amazing.
I assume we're going to have some signage during the nice weather that tells people that it's closed for the summer or something.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of community members who use that.
Yes, and we're continuously coordinating with the district, keeping everyone up to date. We have daily reports that go out. In our internal meetings, we definitely have all that coordinated. You'll see some signage going up within the next couple of days or early next week with construction zones, hard hats, no smoking, that kind of thing going on. There's a special sign that we developed with the school district to just act like a parent type sign. You'll see something like that out there, which is new, which I think is really good for your community to see. So you'll see that out there as well. So.
Yeah, there's the full timeline here for phase 1. We hope by mid-September, if everything goes according to our timeline, that we'll be back in action hosting fall sports on our turf field and in the stadium there. So this is really just to give you the overview of what is forthcoming, and then eventually, once it's concluded in the late summer, early fall, we'll have the crew back to kind of give us an update on the finished product. Of course, we'll be able to go out there and see it ourselves, in addition to more work on phase 2, which is in the planning phase right now. So we'll, again, in the fall, have a meeting where we update you on phase 2 planning. So lots of good things happening and upgrades to our facilities.
You're gonna have a great looking site because we just did the grandstands a couple years back, so you're gonna have a brand new field and track and the organization of the athletics around it, so it's gonna look like a brand new area. So,
Well, thank you.
all right.
Aaron's been giving you flags, like the signage, like the pep signage. With the two tabs that are paid for, like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we have to wait for the weather to break on that, but
Yeah.
we'll have those along the poles.
September 14th looks like the
Yeah, looks like
Yeah.
a good installation day.
The next item here on the agenda is the fund balance and reserves update from Ms. Bazinski. So for consistency purposes, we updated the presentation you've seen a couple times already for the overall 3-year budget, but there's been no changes to our revenue or expenditure projections. This is our fund balance projection through the end of February. So it's important to note that we're still projecting what our expenditures are going to be for March, April, May, and June. But at this point, we are relatively sure that what we're presenting to you is based on our best estimates for what those expenditures will look like.
Great, thank you. So this is, as Mr. Pennell mentioned, our same presentation, but we've inserted the fund balance information to the end. So we'll scroll through that. But then when we give our next update in April, we'll use this again and we'll update our fund balance as well. Okay. All right, so our fund balance projections. So this slide represents both our revenues, our appropriated fund balance, and our appropriations. Starting with our 17-18 budget, our year-to-date revenues and expenses, what our projections are for both receipts and expenditures, and the total, and then how that compares to each. So on the revenue side, our budget was $56,300,000. That included all of our revenues that were in our budget, and it is increased over our adopted budget for gifts and donations that have been received, and those are budget amendments that we do throughout the year. The $1.28 million is the fund balance that we appropriated, including reserves as well as our carryover encumbrances, which gives us our total revenue budget of $57,590,000, which matches our adjusted expenditure budget. On the expenditure side, the adjustments are also for gifts and donations that have been received to date this year, as well as our carryover encumbrances. So that's why those numbers are a little bit higher than our original adopted budget. Year-to-date revenues are just over $44 million, almost $44.5 million, and our year-to-date expenditures are $31 million. And our projections for March, April, May, and June on the revenue side are $12 million of additional dollars and an additional $25 million in expenditures. And that includes all of our salaries, spring athletics, the remainder of our tuition payments for special ed, our BOCES payments, transportation. It includes everything, including estimated expenses for health insurance, which, as you know, is kind of a moving target. So we use averages based on the last several months' worth of claims and then project it forward. So in the final column, received more or less than budgeted. On the revenue column, we show receiving approximately $166,000 more than our booked revenues, which is about 0.3% higher than our budget, which is pretty close on $56 million. The negative 1.2 is the amount of fund balance that we have appropriated, and our goal is to not use it. So for the purposes of this slide, we're going to put that in as a negative because we want to show that that revenue is not going to be received, so that when we compare it to our expenditures, we're actually comparing true receipts of revenues versus that fund balance that we were using to plug that gap. On the appropriation side, we are projecting to underspend our budget by almost $1.2 million. We are watching our expenditures very carefully, and we are being conservative with our estimates because we anticipate that as we move forward, that number will stay the same or be greater of less expenditures. So we want to estimate conservatively. When you take into account our overage in revenues of $166,000, not counting our fund balance, and our underspending of our appropriation budget of $1.2 million, it leaves us with a net budgetary surplus of $75,000. So it's pretty tight, but our goal was to not spend our fund balance. We appropriated it. Some of it was for the contingency plan. We want to increase our fund balance. We want that to grow. We want it to stay stable. So by not spending those funds this year, they're available to help grow our fund balance into future years. So the second slide is really just a summary of our total fund balance and how this year's net budget will affect that. So our year-end fund balance, including reserves, was $7.2 million, and that was part of our audited financial statements from June. And take into account our revenue receipts and our projected expenditures, we should end up with just over 7.2, almost 7.3 million in total fund balance.
Ms. Buzinski, what were we last year? We were pretty tight last year, were we not? Or
Yes,
is it the year
last year
before we were within
Yeah, last year we had
10,000?
about 253,000 of unexpended budget. The year before it was 5,000.
5,000, that's what I'm thinking.
Those are
Yeah.
I was thinking about that.
It's tight. So the good news is the 500,000 contingency, very helpful. We had an expenditure budgeted of about 700,000 for our debt service that we ended up not needing because we borrowed less, so our payment was lower. That helped us a lot. But moving forward, anytime we use fund balance to balance our budget, we do it so that we can make sure our next year's budget is sufficient to cover our needs, but it will always be our goal to not spend it.
Yeah, so when you look at 1.2 million roughly of unexpended funds from the current year, it's a bit misleading knowing that 1.2 is appropriated, and we're really budgeting with 98% accuracy, which is, remarkable and alarming, because, we all know there are things that are going to happen next spring that we have no idea right now, and I would be more comfortable if we were in the range of, a 3%, 3% contingency within our budget and not having any appropriation from fund balance to cover a gap. I mean, that would be ideally where we'd like to be. But we are where we are, and I think we'll get there over time. And we're fortunate that through managing the budget throughout this year, we're hopeful to not use any of the appropriation. And again, as we look towards balancing next year's budget, if we have an appropriation above and beyond the contingency of 500,000, it may be in the 500,000 to 700,000 range, depending upon the state's budget and where they land. But what we're showing here is we have the ability to manage it throughout the year and try to avoid spending it so our overall fund balance and reserves don't decline. Because the target that we've had has always been around 8 million. So we're pleased to show that we may be able to grow it, but we're really looking for the state to step up and be a full partner in providing us with the state aid that we need in order to balance our budget and not have to use our own fund balance and reserves. So, any questions about the fund balance component? And again, we still have March, April, May, and June. So we've done the best we can forecasting our expenditures. The things that are typically unknown are the things that are still unknown. Healthcare, special education, substitute costs, any major repairs or things like that. So the budget is probably, other than that, fully encumbered, and we're using conservative estimates for those things that I mentioned to make sure that if we have any movement in this, our goal is to have it move in the positive direction and not the negative direction. But again, we're only as good as our crystal ball, and at this point, we try to be very conservative with it.
If they allowed us to have a new reserve for TRS, right now we can't reserve for that, correct?
Correct.
So if they did, would the fund balance and reserve goal of 8 million change?
I don't think so, because typically what you would want in a TRS reserve would be anywhere from 0 to 2% of your overall TRS payroll. So at this point, that TRS payroll is around 22 million. So 2% of that would be around $400,000 to $500,000. And I think if we added that to this, we'd still be well within that range, and we would we'd be at 4% of our fund balance, and all of our reserves would be where we want them to be in terms of our long-range reserve plan. It might just take us a little while to grow it. But yeah, the budget is, if you look at our gap that we presented last time, the main contributors are healthcare and the TRS rates changing, which are really causing the shortfall that we have. So there's some evidence for optimism in what was presented by the one houses, the Assembly and the Senate, for the proposals in reaction to the executive budget. But we should see in the next couple weeks where they finally land. But I would have no reservation at this point recommending an appropriation of $500,000 to $700,000 from our fund balance and reserves to close the gap based on what Mrs. Buzinski is presenting here and what we've seen in terms of our ability to manage the budget throughout the year over the last couple of years. So as a reminder, because this is really the second year we've done the fund balance projections in this time, we'll have updates for you in April, and then in June, we'll look to have a resolution on the agenda approving a range of where we think we'll land in the reserves, where we'd like to put them, so when we close out the books over the summer, we have your authorization to be able to put the money in the appropriate reserves. So that was similar to last year, but I find this to be very helpful, knowing where we are in the current year in order to make those decisions about utilization of fund balance and reserves for next year, when we ask you to do that potentially at our next meeting. So that is all we have for the superintendent's report.
We will need a motion for new business.
I'll make a motion for new business. Items F1A through D, 2A through C, 3B, C, E, G, and H.
I'll second the motion.
Rob? Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of new business items F1A through D, 2A through C, and 3B, C, E, G, and H, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Ms. Custodi, do we have any follow-up action items?
I had that the tech committee will report at the next board meeting.
Okay. All right, then we will need a motion to convene to executive session.
I'll make a motion to convene to executive session for matters regarding employment of the particular person.
No, second it.
All those in favor of convening to executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.